Welcome to a medieval castle in England during the year 1348, on the eve of the Black Death's arrival in this region. For the next few hours, we will experience the quiet hours after sunset, when the day's labour ends and night's routines begin, when the great hall grows dim and silent, when servants complete their final tasks before seeking rest, when lords and ladies retire to their private chambers, when guards walk the walls under starlight, and when the castle transforms from a bustling centre of administration and commerce into a place of shadows, whispers, and the slow passage of nighttime hours. If you enjoy these immersive explorations of daily life in historical settings, please like and subscribe to support our channel. The castle is called Thornbury, and it sits on a low hill in Gloucestershire, overlooking fertile farmland and a village of perhaps 200 souls who owe service and rent to the castle's lord. The castle is not one of the great royal fortresses like the Tower of London or Windsor, but neither is it a minor manor house. It is a substantial baronial castle, home to Sir William de Clare, a knight who holds these lands from the Earl of Gloucester, who in turn holds them from the king. The castle's walls enclose perhaps 2 acres, an outer bailey containing stables, workshops, storage buildings, and servants' quarters, and an inner bailey with the great hall, the lord's private apartments, the chapel, and the keep. The walls are stone, 10 feet thick in places, topped with crenellated battlements where guards walk their rounds. 4 towers mark the corners, providing elevated positions for archers and serving as additional living spaces for the lord's family and senior household members. As dusk falls on this autumn evening, the castle is completing its daily routines. The main gate has been closed and barred, the drawbridge raised over the modest moat that provides the castle's first line of defence. In the outer bailey, the animals are being settled for the night. Horses fed and stabled, chickens shut into their coops away from foxes, pigs secured in their pens. A servant named Thomas of Ashford, a man of about 30 who has served in the castle for 15 years, is completing his duties in the stables. Thomas is a groom, responsible for caring for the lord's horses and for the palfreys and riding horses of the household knights and ladies. It is skilled work, requiring knowledge of horses' temperaments and health, and Thomas takes pride in his competence. He moves through the stable in the fading light, checking each horse, ensuring they have adequate hay and water for the night, looking for any signs of injury or illness that might require attention. The horses are valuable. A good war horse can cost as much as a year's income from a substantial manor, and their care is taken seriously. The stable is warm with the body heat of a dozen horses, and it smells of hay and manure and horse sweat, familiar odours that Thomas barely notices. He speaks softly to the animals as he works, his voice calming, his movements gentle. The horses know him, trust him, respond to his presence with quiet snorts and the occasional nuzzle seeking treats. His work complete, Thomas secures the stable door and makes his way across the darkening bailey to the servants' hall, where the evening meal is being served. The bailey is busy with other servants completing their own tasks. The farrier banking the fire in his forge, the laundresses hanging the last cloths to dry, the kitchen workers carrying dishes to the great hall for the Lord's Supper. The castle operates according to strict routines, and everyone knows their role in these routines. The division between day work and night work is marked by the ringing of the chapel bell for Vespers, the evening prayer service that divides the working day from the evening's rest. Those servants whose duties are done attend the service, gathering in the small castle chapel where the chaplain leads prayers in Latin that most do not understand, but all find familiar and comforting. Thomas attends Vespers, standing at the back of the chapel with the other lower servants. The chapel is dim, lit only by candles on the altar and by the fading light through the narrow windows. The stone walls amplify the chaplain's voice, and the Latin phrases echo in the vaulted space. Thomas does not follow the words, but uses the time for quiet reflection, for rest after the day's labour, for the sense of community that comes from praying alongside the others who share his life. After Vespers, the servants' meal is served in the hall attached to the kitchen, a large room with long tables and benches where perhaps 60 servants eat together. The meal is substantial but plain, bread baked in the castle's ovens, pottage made from peas and onions with a bit of bacon for flavour, cheese and ale. It is better fare than the peasants in the village eat. The servants benefit from the Lord's prosperity. But it is nothing like the elaborate meals served in the great hall to the Lord and his family and guests. Thomas sits with the other stable workers and the outdoor servants, the men who work with animals and in the fields and gardens. They eat quickly, efficiently, talking quietly among themselves about the day's events, about horses and weather and the work that awaits tomorrow. The conversation is relaxed, but not boisterous. The servants are tired after a long day, and they have limited time before they must seek their beds. Nearby, at a separate table, the female servants eat their own meal. The laundresses and chambermaids, the kitchen workers, the women who spin and weave and sew. They keep to themselves, as is proper. Though occasional glances and quiet words pass between the male and female servants, hints of friendships and courtships that develop in this closed community, where the same people live and work together, year after year. The meal takes perhaps half an hour, and then the servants begin to disperse to their evening duties or to their rest. Thomas has no evening duties tonight. His turn at night watch in the stables will come later in the week, so he is free to seek his bed. The servants' sleeping quarters are in a long building attached to the outer wall, a single large room with pallets on the floor where the lower servants sleep in communal fashion. But the evening is still young, and Thomas is not ready for sleep. Instead, he joins a group of servants gathering in a corner of the bailey where a fire has been built. It is a social time, the hour or two after supper, when servants can relax, can talk and joke and sing, can briefly forget the hierarchies and routines that structure their days. Someone has brought a small drum, and someone else has a wooden flute, and they play simple tunes that everyone knows. A few servants dance, their movements constrained by exhaustion, but still expressing joy and energy. Others sit and watch, or talk quietly, or work on small tasks, mending clothes, carving wood, repairing tools, while enjoying the companionship. Thomas sits with his friend John, a man of similar age who works as a carpenter, maintaining the castle's wooden structures and crafting furniture and tools. They have known each other since childhood in the nearby village, before both entered service at the castle, and they have maintained their friendship across 15 years of shared labour and life. "The harvest is nearly in," John says, watching the dancers. "Another few days and the fields will be clear. Then we can focus on the winter preparations, firewood to stack, roofs to repair before the snow comes." "The Lord is pleased with the harvest," Thomas replies. "I heard him telling his steward that the yields are good this year. That should mean we're well fed through the winter." They talk of practical things, food and work and weather, but also of personal matters. John is courting one of the kitchen maids, hoping to marry in the spring if the Lord grants permission, and if he can save enough to set up a small household. Thomas offers advice and encouragement, drawing on his own experience. He married 3 years ago, and his wife Emma works as a laundress, and they have a young daughter who sleeps in the women's quarters with her mother. As the evening progresses and full darkness falls, the gathering begins to disperse. The fire is banked, the musicians put away their instruments, the servants drift toward their sleeping quarters. The castle is settling into its night routines, the transition from public activity to private rest, from the communal life of day to the quieter, more individual life of night. But while the servants prepare for sleep, the Lord's household is just beginning its evening. In the great hall, where the servants ate their simple meal hours ago, the high table is now set for the Lord's Supper, a more elaborate affair that will last well into the night. The Great Hall of Thornbury Castle is the architectural and social heart of the entire complex. It is a large rectangular room, approximately 60 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a high vaulted ceiling supported by massive wooden beams. The walls are stone, hung with tapestries that provide both decoration and insulation against the cold. At one end of the hall is the dais where the high table stands, elevated above the main floor, reserved for the Lord and his family and honoured guests. At the other end is the screen passage, separating the hall from the kitchens, and above this passage is the minstrel's gallery where musicians can play during meals. Sir William de Clare, the Lord of Thornbury, is 45 years old, a veteran of campaigns in Scotland and France, a man of substantial wealth and local influence. He sits at the centre of the high table, with his wife Lady Margaret to his right, and his eldest son Robert, aged 22, to his left. Also at the table are a visiting knight from a neighbouring manor, the castle's chaplain, and the steward who manages the household's daily operations. The meal being served is far more elaborate than the servant's supper. The first course includes roasted capon, pike in a spiced sauce, and a subtlety, an elaborate dish shaped like a castle, made from pastry and almond paste, more decorative than edible, but demonstrating the skill of the castle's cooks and the wealth of the host who can afford such displays. The food is brought from the kitchen by a procession of servants supervised by the marshal of the hall, who ensures that service proceeds in proper order and with appropriate ceremony. The dishes are presented first to Sir William, who takes a portion before the platters are passed to the other diners. The etiquette is complex, governed by rules about precedence and honour that everyone at the high table understands and observes. Wine is poured. Good wine from Gascony, imported at considerable expense, a luxury that marks this meal as special. The servants who pour wear livery bearing Sir William's coat of arms, and they perform their duties with practiced precision, filling cups at exactly the right moment, never allowing a cup to remain empty for long. The conversation at the high table is quiet but substantial. Sir William discusses estate business with his steward, the harvest yields, the condition of the mills and bridges on the manor lands, disputes among the tenants that require the Lord's judgment. Lady Margaret speaks with the visiting knight about mutual acquaintances, about marriages being negotiated, about the health of various noble families in the region. Robert, the eldest son, listens more than he speaks, as is appropriate for a young man in the presence of his elders. He is being trained in the management of the estate, learning the complex skills of lordship, how to judge men, how to manage finances, how to maintain authority while showing appropriate mercy and generosity, how to balance competing demands and interests. Someday, he will inherit these lands, and he must be prepared to govern them competently.
The meal progresses through several courses, each announced by the marshal. After the first course comes a second featuring venison meat from the Lord's deer park, a privilege of nobility that common people cannot legally enjoy. Then a third course with small birds, with elaborate sauces, with fine white bread that is a luxury compared to the dark bread the servants eat. Between courses, there is entertainment. A minstrel in the gallery plays the lute and sings ballads about knights and ladies, about courtly love and noble deeds. The music is pleasant background to conversation, not meant to command full attention, but to enhance the atmosphere of refined civility that the meal is meant to create. This elaborate dining is not merely about eating, it is a performance of status, a demonstration of Sir William's position in the social hierarchy, a ritual that reinforces the order of medieval society. The food, the service, the setting, the ceremony all communicate that this is a noble household, that the man presiding over this table has authority and wealth and the right to command others. But the performance is also genuine in its way. Sir William takes his responsibilities seriously. He sees himself as the father of his household, responsible for the welfare of all who live within these walls, from his family to the lowliest kitchen boy. This paternalism is self-serving, it maintains his authority and justifies his privileges, but it is also deeply felt. He believes in the social order that places him at the top, believes he has duties as well as rights, believes that good lordship requires both strength and compassion. As the meal concludes and the last dishes are cleared, Sir William announces that he will hear petitions before retiring. This is a regular evening ritual, the Lord making himself available to hear grievances, to settle disputes, to dispense justice and favour. It is both a duty and a demonstration of power, the Lord as judge and arbiter, the final authority within his domain. 3 people step forward to present petitions. The first is a tenant farmer from the village, who complains that a neighbour's pigs have repeatedly broken into his grain field and destroyed part of his crop. He asks the Lord to compel the neighbour to restrain the animals and to compensate him for the loss. Sir William listens carefully, asks questions about the extent of the damage and about any previous disputes between the 2 farmers. He then summons the neighbour, who is waiting nervously in the lower hall. The neighbor admits that his pigs did break into the field, but argues that the complainant's fence was poorly maintained and that shared responsibility should mean shared cost of repair. After hearing both sides, Sir William renders judgment. The pig owner must pay a small compensation for the damaged crop and must ensure his pigs are properly penned. But the complainant must also repair his fence to proper standards. Both men accept the judgment the Lord has spoken, and his word is law within the manor. The second petition is from a widow whose husband died 6 months ago, leaving her with 3 young children and a small plot of land that she cannot work alone. She asks permission to take her late husband's brother as a tenant to help work the land, and she asks for a temporary reduction in her rent until the land is productive again. This is a delicate matter. The widow's request is reasonable, but it sets a precedent. If the Lord grants too many such concessions, his income suffers. Sir William considers carefully, consults quietly with his steward about the widow's circumstances and her late husband's service to the manor. He then grants the request, but makes clear that it is temporary, that rent will return to normal levels after next year's harvest. The widow thanks him profusely, nearly in tears with relief. For her, this judgment may mean the difference between survival and destitution. Sir William acknowledges her thanks with a slight nod, maintaining the dignity and distance appropriate to his position, but there is kindness in his eyes. He remembers her late husband, a good man who served loyally for many years. The third petition is from a young man who wishes to marry and requests the Lord's permission and his blessing. In the feudal system, serfs cannot marry without their lord's permission, and even free tenants often seek the Lord's blessing for important life events. The young man is a baker's son from the village, and his intended is the daughter of a smith. It is a good match, uniting 2 skilled craftsmen's families. Sir William grants permission readily and announces that he will provide a small gift to the couple, a measure of grain and a young pig as a wedding present. This generosity costs him little but earns substantial goodwill and reinforces his image as a beneficent lord who cares for his people's welfare. With the petitions concluded, Sir William rises, signaling the end of the public portion of the evening. The lower hall begins to clear as servants and tenants who attended the petitions depart. The high table guests retire to the solar, the Lord's private living quarters, located in the tower above the Great Hall. The solar is Sir William's refuge from the public life of lordship. It is a comfortable room, well furnished with a large bed, cushioned chairs, a writing desk, chests containing valuable possessions, and a fireplace providing warmth. Tapestries cover the walls, depicting hunting scenes and biblical stories. Candles in bronze holders provide light, expensive illumination that only the wealthy can afford in quantity. Lady Margaret retires to her adjacent chamber, attended by her ladies-in-waiting who help her prepare for bed. The visiting knight is shown to a guest chamber in another tower. Robert remains with his father for a private conversation, father and son talking about the day's business, about decisions made and challenges ahead. The widow's petition was wisely handled, Robert observes. Compassion that costs little but earns much loyalty. Loyalty is the foundation of lordship, Sir William replies. Fear can compel obedience, but loyalty compels service beyond mere obedience. The widow will remember this favor, and her children will grow up knowing that their lord showed mercy to their mother in her time of need. They talk about the estate's finances, about the need to maintain the castle's defenses, about political developments in the region. Sir William is grooming his son to succeed him, sharing the knowledge and wisdom accumulated over 2 decades of lordship. These private conversations are Robert's real education in governance, more valuable than anything he learned as a page and squire. As the evening grows late, Robert retires to his own chamber, and Sir William prepares for bed. His body servant helps him remove his outer garments, his heavy woolen tunic, and his embroidered surcoat. He keeps on his linen undergarments. Sleeping naked is considered unhealthy, an invitation to illness through exposure to night air. Before sleeping, Sir William kneels at a small altar in the corner of the solar and says his prayers for his family's health and safety, for good harvest and peace in the realm, for the souls of his deceased parents and ancestors, for forgiveness of his sins. The prayers are routine, repeated nightly for as long as he can remember, but they are also genuine expressions of faith and of the worldview that structures his understanding of existence. He climbs into bed, pulling heavy curtains around the bed frame to create a small enclosed space that will hold warmth through the night. Lady Margaret joins him, having completed her own preparations for sleep. They talk quietly for a few minutes, domestic conversation about children and household matters before sleep claims them. Outside the solar, the castle continues its nighttime routines. Servants finish their final tasks and seek their beds. Guards take up positions on the walls, beginning the night watch that will continue until dawn. The great hall grows dark and empty, its fires banked but not extinguished. The castle settles into the quiet rhythm of night, a rhythm very different from the busy activity of day, but equally essential to the functioning of this complex household. High on the castle walls, a guard named Geoffrey of Norton walks his assigned section of the battlements, his spear resting on his shoulder, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the walls. Geoffrey is 40 years old, a veteran man-at-arms, who has served Sir William for 15 years, who has fought in his lord's campaigns, and proven his loyalty and competence. The night watch is essential to castle security, though in truth, the likelihood of attack is low. England is at peace. More or less there are always local disputes and occasional banditry, but the large-scale warfare that characterized earlier decades has subsided. Still, the watch must be maintained. A castle that does not guard itself invites trouble, and the discipline of regular watches keeps the garrison sharp and ready should genuine threats emerge. Geoffrey shares this watch with 3 other guards, each walking a section of the walls, meeting at the towers where they exchange brief words before continuing their rounds. The watches rotate every 4 hours. Geoffrey has the evening watch, from dusk until midnight, after which he will be relieved and can sleep until dawn. The night is clear and cold, the autumn air crisp, stars brilliant overhead, in a sky unmarred by any artificial light, except the occasional torch or lantern within the castle. The moon is nearly full, providing enough light to see the landscape beyond the walls, the village, with its cluster of houses, the fields stripped bare after harvest, the dark line of forest in the distance. From his elevated position, Geoffrey can see the entire immediate area around the castle. He watches for any unusual activity, lights where none should be, movement on the roads, signs of people where none belong. But the night is quiet. The village is dark, except for a few fires visible through cracks in shuttered windows. The roads are empty. Nothing moves, except the occasional fox or deer. The work is boring, but Geoffrey does not mind. He has walked these walls countless times, in all seasons and weather, and he has learned to find a kind of meditative peace in the routine. The walking keeps him warm despite the cold air. The solitude gives him time to think, to remember, to consider his life and his place in the world. He thinks about his family, his wife Mary, who works as a seamstress in the castle, his 3 children who are growing up within these walls, learning trades that will sustain them as they become adults. His eldest son, 14 years old, is training as a farrier, learning to shoe horses and work iron. His daughter, 12, assists her mother with sewing and is becoming skilled with needle and thread. His youngest son, 8, is a stable boy, doing the simple tasks that will eventually lead to more skilled work with horses. Geoffrey is proud of his children, proud that they are learning useful skills, proud that they live in relative security and prosperity within the castle household. His own childhood was harder. He grew up in a poor village, the son of a peasant farmer, and he entered military service as a young man because it offered better prospects than a lifetime of agricultural labor. He has done well in service. He has survived campaigns that killed many of his comrades. He has earned his lord's trust and a position of responsibility. He has accumulated a small amount of savings, enough to provide modest dowries for his daughter when she marries, and to help his sons establish themselves in their trades. It is a good life, better than he once dared hope for. As he walks, Geoffrey encounters Richard, another guard, completing his own circuit of the walls. They pause at the tower, exchanging the formal words that confirm all is well. Any sign? Nothing. Keep watch. Aye. But they also exchange a few less formal words, the small social interactions that break the monotony of the watch. Richard mentions that his back aches from the cold, jokes about getting old, wonders how many more winters he will be able to climb these stairs and walk these walls. Geoffrey commiserates, shares his own complaints about aging joints and diminishing strength, but they both know they will continue in service as long as they are able, because it is their livelihood and their identity. The conversation is brief. They each have their assigned sections to patrol, but it is a small reminder that they are not alone, that they are part of a community, that others share their work and their lives. Geoffrey continues his circuit, reaching the corner tower that overlooks the gatehouse. From here, he can see the main approach to the castle, the road that winds up the hill from the village. Nothing moves on the road. The drawbridge is up, the gate barred, the castle secure against any threat. In the gatehouse below, The porter and his assistant maintain their own watch, ready to open the gate should anyone arrive with legitimate business, though nighttime arrivals are rare. The porter's position is one of considerable trust. He controls access to the castle, must judge who should be admitted and who should be turned away, must be alert to threats while also facilitating legitimate traffic. Geoffrey knows the porter well, a man named William who has held the position for 20 years, who knows by sight virtually everyone who has legitimate reason to enter the castle, who can spot strangers and assess whether they pose threats. The porter's judgment has kept the castle safe through many years, and his vigilance complements the guard's watch on the walls. As midnight approaches, Geoffrey's watch is nearing its end. He completes one final circuit of his section, checking that all is well, watching and listening for anything unusual. The castle below is mostly dark now, only a few windows showing light the Lord's solar, where perhaps Sir William is still awake, reading or working on accounts. The guardroom where off-duty guards play dice by firelight. The bakery where the baker and his assistants are already at work, preparing dough for tomorrow's bread. At midnight, the chapel bell rings, marking the hour and calling the monks in the nearby monastery to their midnight prayers. In the castle chapel, the chaplain also observes this hour, praying alone in the dark chapel, fulfilling his vocation of regular prayer that sustains the spiritual life of the household. The relief watch arrives, guards who have slept the early evening hours, and are now ready to take over the night watch that will continue until dawn. Geoffrey reports that all is quiet, that nothing unusual has occurred during his watch. He hands off his position and descends from the walls, his duty complete for the night. He makes his way to the guardroom, a chamber built into the base of one of the towers, where off-duty guards can rest, warm themselves by the fire, and socialize. A half-dozen men are there, some preparing to sleep, others too wakeful to retire and choosing to spend an hour or two in companionship. A fire burns in the hearth, and someone has brought bread and ale from the stores. Geoffrey accepts a cup of ale, warms himself by the fire, and joins the quiet conversation. The men talk about the watch, about the castle's routine, about small events and concerns, a horse that seems to be going lame, a roof that needs repair before winter, rumors about developments in the wider world beyond the castle. One of the younger guards asks Geoffrey about the Scottish campaigns he participated in years ago, and Geoffrey tells a few stories carefully edited, emphasizing camaraderie and adventure, while downplaying the fear and brutality that characterized medieval warfare. The young guard listens eagerly, romanticizing military service in the way young men often do, not yet understanding the reality behind the stories. Geoffrey does not disillusion him. Let the boy have his dreams. If he ever experiences real combat, he will learn the truth soon enough. For now, the stories serve their purpose, they entertain, they build bonds among the guards, they maintain the military culture that is essential to the castle's defense. After an hour in the guardroom, Geoffrey is ready for sleep. He makes his way to the barracks, where the unmarried men-at-arms sleep a long room with beds along the walls. Plain but adequate. Warmer than the servants' quarters, because guards are valued members of the household and are provided better accommodations. Geoffrey's bed is a simple wooden frame with a straw mattress and woolen blankets. He removes his boots and outer garments, but sleeps in his undertunic, as most people do. The room is dark except for faint light from the banked fire at one end, and it is quiet except for the snoring of men already asleep. He lies down, pulls the blankets over himself, and feels sleep approaching. His body is tired from the watch, and his mind is ready to rest. Tomorrow will bring another day of duties, another watch to stand, another routine day in the life of a castle guard. But that is tomorrow. For now, there is sleep, and the knowledge that his watch is ended, and others have taken up the burden of vigilance. The castle sleeps, but it does not sleep entirely. The guards on the walls continue their rounds. The porter maintains his watch at the gate. The castle is never entirely undefended, never entirely at rest. This is the nature of a medieval castle. It is simultaneously a home and a fortress, a place of domestic life and a defensive position, and it must maintain both characters through all hours of day and night. In the long building attached to the outer wall where the lower servants sleep, the night is not entirely quiet. Perhaps 40 men sleep here, grooms and laborers, kitchen workers and craftsmen's assistants, the lower tier of the household hierarchy, men who do essential work, but who lack the skills or seniority that would earn them better positions or private quarters. Thomas, the groom we met earlier, lies on his pallet trying to sleep despite the noise around him. Someone nearby snores loudly, a rhythmic rumbling that makes sleep difficult. Further down the room, two young servants are whispering to each other, their conversation audible in the quiet, despite their attempts to keep their voices low. The room smells of unwashed bodies bathing is infrequent for everyone in this era, though the castle's more privileged members bathe more often than servants do. The sleeping arrangements are communal and offer no privacy. The pallets are arranged close together, separated by only a few feet, and everyone can hear everyone else's movements and sounds. Personal belongings are kept in small chests under the pallets or hung on pegs on the walls, and theft is a constant concern despite the penalties for stealing from fellow servants. Despite the discomforts, Thomas is accustomed to these conditions. He has slept in this room for 15 years, has learned to ignore the snoring and the close quarters, has adjusted to the lack of privacy. It is simply how servants live, and he knows no different arrangement would be possible. Private rooms for lower servants would be an unthinkable luxury. He thinks about his wife Emma and his daughter Alice, sleeping in similar conditions in the women's quarters on the other side of the castle. He sees them daily, they eat meals together when their duties allow, they speak in passing as they go about their work, they spend their free hours together when possible. But they cannot share sleeping quarters, because the sexes are strictly separated in the servants' lodgings to prevent impropriety. This separation is frustrating but also understood as necessary. The castle operates on principles of order and propriety, and allowing men and women to sleep in the same quarters would invite chaos and scandal. Only married servants who have reached higher positions, like the steward or the master of the stables, are provided small, private rooms where couples can live together. Thomas hopes someday to reach such a position, to become the master groom or even the master of the stables, positions that would bring both higher status and the privilege of private quarters. But such positions are few, and many capable men compete for them. For now, he accepts his situation and does his work competently, hoping that his loyalty and skill will eventually be rewarded. As he lies in the darkness, trying to ignore the snoring, Thomas reflects on his day, the horses he tended, the conversations he had, the small satisfactions and frustrations that filled his waking hours. It was an ordinary day, like most days, defined by routine and repetition. Tomorrow will be much the same, and the day after, and the day after that, an endless succession of similar days stretching ahead. Is he content with this life? The question would puzzle him if anyone asked it. Contentment is not a concept he thinks about much. Life is what it is: work and eat and sleep, serve the Lord, tend the horses, raise his family as best he can. There are small pleasures, good food when available, companionship with friends, time with his wife and daughter, the satisfaction of work well done. There are hardships too, the cold and discomfort, the long hours, the subordination to those above him in the hierarchy. But these are simply the conditions of existence. He does not imagine a radically different life because he has no framework for imagining it. The social order is fixed, ordained by God, and his place in it is determined by birth and circumstances beyond his control. He can work to improve his position within the servant hierarchy, can hope for small advances, but he cannot imagine becoming something other than a servant. This acceptance is not resignation, but rather a deep internalization of the medieval worldview. The universe is hierarchical. God above angels, above humans, above animals, and human society reflects this divine order. Kings rule over lords, lords over knights, knights over common people, men over women, parents over children. Everyone has their place, and the proper functioning of society depends on everyone accepting their place and fulfilling its duties. Eventually, despite the noise and discomfort, Thomas drifts into sleep. His last thoughts are practical. He must remember to check the bay gelding's hoof in the morning, must ensure the stables are cleaned thoroughly before the Lord's inspection, must speak to the farrier about shoeing one of the palfreys. Elsewhere in the servants' quarters, others are also settling into sleep. A young kitchen boy, exhausted from his first full day of work, sleeps so deeply that nothing disturbs him. An older carpenter, his body aching from decades of physical labor, shifts position frequently, seeking comfort that his worn joints cannot find. Two friends whisper about a girl one of them fancies, planning how he might court her properly and win permission to marry. In the women's quarters, similar scenes unfold. Emma, Thomas's wife, lies on her pallet thinking about her daughter Alice, who sleeps nearby. Alice is 4 years old, already helping with simple tasks, like carrying water or holding yarn while the women wind it into balls. In a few years, she will begin learning more complex skills, sewing, spinning, perhaps cooking, if she shows aptitude. Emma hopes Alice will do better than she herself has done, will learn skills that might earn her a better position, perhaps even a place in Lady Margaret's personal service, which would be a substantial rise in status. But Emma also knows that such advancement is uncertain, dependent on opportunity and patronage and luck as much as on skill and effort. For now, Alice is safe and healthy and learning her place in the world. That is enough. Emma says a quick prayer, thanking God for her family's health, asking for protection through the night, entreating the Virgin Mary to watch over her child. Then she allows herself to sleep, her body tired from a day spent washing linens and carrying water, her hands raw from working with lye soap and rough cloth. The servants' quarters gradually fall quiet as sleep claims most of the occupants. A few remain wakeful, some from insomnia, some from worries that won't let them rest, some simply not tired enough to sleep. They lie in the darkness, thinking private thoughts, listening to the breathing and snoring of their fellows, waiting for sleep to come. Outside, the castle continues its night watch. Inside, the majority of its inhabitants sleep, their bodies resting after labor, their minds quiet or troubled according to their individual circumstances. The castle is home to perhaps 200 people, from the lord in his comfortable solar to the lowliest stable boy on his straw pallet, all sheltering within these walls, all bound together in the complex web of relationships and dependencies that constitute a medieval household. This household is a small world unto itself, largely self-sufficient, producing most of what it needs, operating according to established customs and hierarchies, stable and enduring across generations. The people who live here, lord and lady, knights and servants, craftsmen and laborers, all have their roles to play, their duties to fulfill, their places in the intricate social machinery that makes this small world function. And function it does, day after day, year after year, through the slow passage of medieval time, when change comes gradually, and life's rhythms are determined by the seasons and the liturgical calendar, rather than by any hope or expectation of progress or improvement. The castle stands, the household endures, and the people within it live out their lives, according to patterns established centuries before and expected to continue centuries hence. While most of the castle sleeps, the bakery is already alive with activity. The baker, a man named Walter of Winchester, and his 2 assistants rise at midnight to begin the long process of preparing bread for the next day. Bread is the foundation of the medieval diet, consumed at every meal by everyone in the castle, and the baker's work is essential to feeding the household. Walter has been the castle baker for 12 years, a skilled craftsman who learned his trade through a 7-year apprenticeship and who takes pride in his work. Baking in the medieval era is more complex than in later times. Yeast must be cultivated and maintained, dough must be mixed by hand, ovens must be heated to precise temperatures, judged by experience, rather than by thermometers. The bakery is a separate building in the outer bailey, built of stone with thick walls to contain the heat of the ovens and to minimize fire risk. Inside, the workspace is dominated by 2 large ovens, built into the walls, capable of baking dozens of loaves at a time. There are also long wooden tables for kneading dough, shelves holding supplies of flour and salt, and the sourdough starter that Walter maintains carefully, feeding it regularly with flour and water to keep the yeast culture alive. Walter and his assistants, 2 young men in their late teens, learning the trade through service, begin by stoking the ovens, adding wood to the fires that have been banked overnight, bringing the temperature up to the level needed for baking. This takes time and skill. Too hot, and the bread will burn. Too cool, and it won't bake properly. Walter judges the temperature by holding his hand inside the oven, by the color and behavior of the flames, by experience accumulated over decades of baking. While the ovens heat, the assistants begin mixing dough. They work with different types of flour: fine white flour milled from carefully cleaned wheat for the lord's table, coarser whole wheat flour for the servants, and a mixture of grains including barley and rye for the coarsest bread that will go to the lowest servants and to the poor who come to the castle gate seeking alms. The dough is mixed in large wooden troughs, combining flour with water, salt, and a portion of the sourdough starter. The mixing is hard physical work, requiring strong arms and backs to work the sticky dough into a consistent mass. The young assistants labor steadily, their movements practiced from months of repetition, their muscles adapted to the demands of the work. Walter supervises, checking the consistency of the dough, adding flour or water as needed, ensuring the proportions are correct. Good bread requires getting these proportions right, and experience is the only reliable guide. Too much water and the dough will be sticky and difficult to work. Too little and the bread will be dry and dense. The correct consistency is something Walter can feel in his hands, can judge by how the dough behaves as it's kneaded. Once mixed, the dough must be kneaded, worked with the hands to develop the gluten that gives bread its structure and texture. This is more hard physical labor, and the assistants take turns kneading, their hands and arms working the dough in rhythmic motions, pushing and folding, stretching and compressing, gradually transforming the shaggy mass into smooth, elastic dough. Walter kneads the fine white flour dough himself. This bread will go to the Lord's table, and he trusts only his own hands to get it exactly right. The work is meditative, repetitive, allowing his mind to wander while his hands perform familiar motions. He thinks about his family, his wife who helps in the bakery, his 3 children who are apprenticed to various trades in the castle and the village. He thinks about the bread he's making, imagining it on the Lord's table, hoping it will be good enough to earn praise from the steward. The dough is left to rise while the ovens continue heating. This is a quiet time, a brief respite in the night's labor, and the bakers sit on benches, drinking weak ale and eating yesterday's bread, talking quietly among themselves. One of the assistants, a boy named Robin, asks Walter about the origins of their sourdough starter. Walter explains that it came from the previous baker, who received it from his predecessor, a chain of transmission stretching back decades, perhaps centuries. The yeast culture in the starter is descended from yeast that has been feeding on flour and multiplying for longer than anyone can remember, a living connection to all the bakers who have worked in this bakery across the generations. This continuity pleases Walter. He is part of a tradition, maintaining skills and knowledge passed down through time, producing bread much as his predecessors did, using methods that have changed little in centuries. When he retires, if he lives long enough to retire, he will pass the starter to his successor, continuing the chain, ensuring the tradition endures. As the dough rises and the ovens reach proper temperature, Walter and his assistants begin shaping loaves. The dough is divided into portions, each portion shaped by hand into the traditional form round loaves for most purposes, longer loaves for the Lord's table. The shaping is skilled work, requiring the right touch to create loaves that will bake evenly and have the desired texture. The shaped loaves are placed on long wooden peels, flat boards with handles that will be used to slide them into the hot ovens. Before baking, each loaf is marked with a cut or stamp identifying the type of flour and the intended recipient. This marking prevents confusion and ensures that the fine white bread goes to the high table and the coarse bread to the servants. When all is ready, Walter opens the oven doors, quickly rakes out most of the ash and coals, and begins loading loaves. The heat is intense, and he works quickly to minimize heat loss, sliding the peels into the oven, tilting them so the loaves slide off onto the hot oven floor, withdrawing the peels, and immediately loading the next batch. The ovens can hold perhaps 50 loaves at a time, and Walter will bake several batches through the night and early morning to produce enough bread for the entire household's daily needs. The first batch in the ovens now will be ready in perhaps 45 minutes, time enough to prepare the next batch of shaped loaves, while the first batch bakes. The rhythm of the work is steady and demanding mix, knead, shape, bake, repeat. There is no rest until all the bread for the day is baked, cooled, and delivered to the kitchens and to the steward who distributes it to the household. Walter and his assistants will work through the night and well into the morning, fueled by ale and yesterday's bread, their bodies tired, but their hands continuing the familiar motions that produce the staff of life for everyone in the castle. As the first batch of bread bakes, filling the bakery with the wonderful smell of baking bread, Walter reflects on his position. He is a skilled craftsman, essential to the household's functioning, accorded respect, appropriate to his expertise. He is not a servant in the same sense as the grooms and laborers. His skill elevates him above their level, gives him status and security. He earns wages rather than just receiving food and lodging, enough to support his family comfortably, if not luxuriously. He has a small house in the village where his wife and children live, though he sleeps most nights in a room attached to the bakery to be close to his work. He has some independence, some control over his own labor, though he remains subordinate to the steward and ultimately to the Lord. It is a good position, better than most men achieve, and Walter is grateful for it. He knows how fortunate he is to have learned a valuable trade, to have secured a position in a great household, to be able to provide for his family. He thanks God regularly for these blessings and tries to do his work well, to fulfill his responsibilities, to maintain the standards that his position requires. The first batch of bread comes out of the oven, the loaves golden brown and perfectly baked. Walter inspects them carefully, tapping their bottoms to ensure they sound hollow, checking that they are cooked through. Satisfied, he sets them aside to cool and loads the next batch into the oven. The work continues through the deepest hours of night, while the castle sleeps around him. The bakery is an island of light and warmth and activity in the dark, quiet castle, the baker and his assistants performing their essential labor, producing the bread that will feed the household through the coming day. Outside, the stars wheel slowly overhead, marking the passage of the night hours. Inside the bakery, time is marked by batches of bread, first batch, second batch, third batch, the rhythm of production that will continue until the day's supply is complete. It is repetitive work, demanding work, but also satisfying work, the creation of something essential and good, the transformation of raw flour into the fundamental food that sustains life. Walter would not trade this work for any other. He is a baker, as his father was, and his grandfather before him. It is his identity, his purpose, his contribution to the household and to the world. And so he bakes, through the long night hours, while the castle sleeps and waits for the dawn that will bring another day. The darkest hours before dawn are the quietest in the castle. Most of the household is deeply asleep, exhausted by the day's labor, and unconscious in the deep sleep that comes in the hours after midnight. Even the guards on the walls are fighting drowsiness, the most difficult part of their watch, when the body demands sleep and vigilance, becomes a battle against nature. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the castle begins to stir again. The first hints of dawn appear in the eastern sky, the stars beginning to fade, the darkness becoming fractionally less complete. The changing light signals the beginning of a new day, the end of night's routines, and the beginning of days. In the bakery, Walter loads the final batch of bread into the ovens. This batch is the fine white bread for the Lord's table, the most important of the day's baking, and Walter gives it his full attention, despite his fatigue after hours of continuous work. When this batch is baked and cooled, his night's labor will be complete, and he can rest while his assistants deliver the bread and begin cleaning the bakery. In the chapel, the chaplain is preparing for Lauds, the morning prayer service that marks the beginning of the monastic day. Though the castle is not a monastery, the chaplain maintains a monastic schedule of prayers, and some members of the household who are particularly devout join him for these services. Lady Margaret is often among them. She rises before dawn to attend Lauds, beginning her day with prayer as her religious devotion requires. In the Lord's Solar, Sir William is still asleep, but he will wake soon. His day begins with the sunrise, and he is accustomed to rising early, despite the late hours he sometimes keeps. His body servant, who sleeps in a small adjacent chamber, is already stirring, preparing to wake his master and help him dress for the day ahead. In the servants' quarters, the first servants are beginning to wake. The kitchen workers must rise early to prepare breakfast and to begin the day's cooking. The stable workers must feed the horses and prepare them for whatever duties the day brings. The castle's routines are tightly scheduled, and those who oversee the day's beginning cannot sleep as late as those whose duties come later. Thomas, the groom, is among those who wake as the first light appears. He rises from his pallet, dresses quickly in the cold air, and makes his way to the stables to begin his day. The horses greet him with quiet whickers, recognizing the sound of his footsteps, anticipating the feed he brings. As he works, distributing hay and grain, checking each horse for any problems that might have developed overnight, Thomas can see the sky lightening through the stable's open door. Another night has passed. Another day is beginning. The rhythm continues, unchanging, the daily cycle that has repeated for as long as anyone can remember, and that will continue for as long as the castle stands and the household endures. In the great hall, servants are stirring the fires back to life, adding wood to the banked coals, beginning the work of heating the large space for the day's activities. The hall is cold after the long night, and it will take time to warm it adequately. The servants work quietly, their movements practiced, performing routines they have done countless times. The castle is transitioning from night to day, from the quiet, private hours when most sleep to the busy, public hours when work and activity fill the space. This transition happens gradually, without drama, a slow accumulation of waking individuals until the whole household is conscious and moving. In the village below the castle, similar stirrings are occurring. Peasants are waking, preparing to go to the fields for the day's agricultural work. The blacksmith is stoking his forge. The baker, a different baker than the castle's Walter, serving the village rather than the lord, is completing his own night's work of bread-making. The parish priest is preparing for morning mass, which the villagers will attend before going to their work. The castle and the village are interconnected parts of the same system, the manor, the basic unit of medieval social and economic organization. The castle provides defense, justice, and order. The village provides food, labor, and rent. Together they form a largely self-sufficient community, dependent on the outside world, for only a few specialized goods and luxuries, functioning according to patterns established centuries before. As the sun breaks above the eastern horizon, its first rays strike the castle's walls, painting the grey stone with golden light. The guards on the walls, who have watched through the long night, see the sunrise with relief. Their watch is nearly over, and they can soon descend from the cold walls and seek warmth and rest. In the solar, Sir William wakes to his servant's gentle voice. "My lord, dawn has come. The day awaits." He rises, allows himself to be dressed in his daytime clothing, and prepares to begin another day of lordship, hearing reports from his steward, making decisions about estate management, receiving visitors, administering justice, performing the countless tasks that lordship requires. Lady Margaret has completed Lords and returned to her chamber, where her ladies-in-waiting are helping her dress and arrange her hair. She will break her fast with bread and wine, then attend to her own duties, overseeing the household servants, managing the castle's domestic operations, perhaps working on embroidery or other crafts appropriate to a noble lady, receiving visits from women of her social class. Robert, the eldest son, is already up and dressed, preparing to ride out with several men-at-arms to inspect the manor's boundaries and to check on work being done to maintain the roads and bridges. This is part of his training in lordship, learning the physical extent of the estate, understanding the maintenance work required, being seen by the tenants, so they recognize him as their future lord. The castle is fully awake now, its inhabitants embarked on another day's routines. The night has passed, as all nights pass, a time of rest for most, and continued work for a few, a necessary interlude between days, a reminder that human activity operates within natural cycles of light and darkness, that no amount of artificial illumination can eliminate. Looking back across the night, we have experienced from dusk's falling through the deep hours of darkness to dawn's arrival. What patterns emerge? What does this night tell us about life in a medieval castle? First, we see the strict ordering of life, according to hierarchy. From the lord in his comfortable solar to the servant on his straw pallet, everyone has a place, and that place determines their living conditions, their diet, their duties, their entire experience of life. This hierarchy is not questioned or resented, it is simply the way things are, the natural order ordained by God and maintained by human society. Second, we see the communal nature of medieval life. Privacy, as we understand it, barely exists. Servants sleep in large dormitory rooms. The lord and lady have private chambers, but even they are constantly attended by servants and cannot escape being observed. Life is lived in public or semi-public spaces, under the eyes of others, according to social expectations that govern behavior. Third, we see the importance of routine and ritual. The day is structured by prayer times, by meal times, by work schedules that repeat with only minor variations. This routine provides stability and predictability, ensures that necessary work is done, coordinates the activities of hundreds of people so they function together as a coherent household. Fourth, we see the castle as both home and fortress, serving dual purposes that shape its architecture and its routines. The walls and guards provide security. The great hall and private chambers provide domestic space. The castle must be simultaneously defensive and habitable, military and civilian, and its nighttime routines reflect both aspects. Fifth, we see the dependence of the entire system on human labor. Every comfort, every security, every function of the castle depends on someone's work. The horses are cared for because Thomas tends them. The bread is available because Walter bakes it. The castle is secure because Geoffrey and his fellow guards maintain their watch. The lord's comfort depends on servants performing countless tasks. Nothing happens automatically. Everything requires human effort. Finally, we see the castle as a microcosm of medieval society. All the social classes are represented here: nobility, knights, free servants, unfree servants, craftsmen, laborers. All the basic economic activities are present: agriculture in the surrounding fields, manufacturing in the workshops, trade through the merchants who visit, service through the household staff. The castle contains in miniature the entire structure of medieval civilization. As the sun rises higher and the new day fully begins, the castle's night fades into memory. The experiences we have shared: the Lord's Supper and petitions, the guards watch on the walls, the servants rest, the baker's labor will be repeated tonight, and tomorrow night. And every night, with only minor variations, for years and decades and generations. The medieval castle is not a place of constant drama or adventure. It is a place of routine, of hierarchy, of slow-moving time measured by seasons and liturgical calendars, rather than by any expectation of change or progress. The people who live here, lord and lady, knight and servant, craftsman and laborer, live lives that their ancestors lived, and that their descendants will live, following patterns so established and enduring that they seem eternal. Yet there is dignity in this life, and meaning, and even a kind of contentment that comes from knowing one's place and fulfilling one's duties. The Lord takes pride in governing well, in caring for his household, in maintaining the order and justice that are his responsibilities. The servants take pride in their skills, in work well done, in the respect that competence earns. The craftsmen take pride in their products, in bread well baked, or horses well tended, or guards well kept. These are not the individualistic satisfactions that modern people seek, not self-expression, or personal growth, or the pursuit of happiness as an end in itself. These are the satisfactions of duty fulfilled, of place accepted, of participation in an order larger than oneself. They are satisfactions appropriate to a worldview that values stability over change, tradition over innovation, collective order over individual freedom. And so the night passes, and the day begins, and the castle continues its ancient rhythms, sheltering those who live within its walls, maintaining the order and security that make civilized life possible, enduring through the slow centuries of medieval time, a monument to human organization and human effort, a home to lords and servants alike, a fortress against external threats, and a refuge from the uncertainties of the world beyond its walls. The medieval castle at night, quiet, ordered, hierarchical, communal, is medieval civilization in miniature, a small world where everyone knows their place and performs their duties, where life proceeds according to established patterns, where the night is not feared but welcomed as a necessary rest from labor, where darkness brings not chaos but simply a different set of routines, and where dawn's arrival promises not change but continuity, another day like the days before, the eternal return of the familiar that characterizes life, in an age when the great wheel of time turns slowly, and tomorrow is expected to be much like today, as today was much like yesterday, as tomorrow will be much like today, world without end.